Everybody knows the world ain't right. Down on your knees, get up and fight.
G'day, Rockhound here. After the dust settled from seeing that excellent first full trailer for Ark Raiders, I've had some time to ponder a few things about this upcoming game from Embark Studios. More specifically, I've been thinking about the key elements that Embark will have to do well to place Ark Raiders on the road to success. Launching any game in the current global climate is no mean feat. Game makers are often working from home, which can stifle workflows and add delays to a game's development. Likewise, players are probably jaded from a few recent mishits from AAA studios and are hungry for a game that's well made, fun to play, and made by happy game makers.
Why can't we have some meat?
So with those things in mind, let's take a look at what I think are 5 key elements that Embark Studios will need to do well if this game is to fly. During the Ark Raiders trailer, we learned that the enemies we'll fight in this free-to-play co-op PvE shooter are called Ark. Ark are going to be AI enemies, and Embark Studios has clearly been putting a lot of effort into developing AI that use machine learning, so those enemies become better at their daily job of wiping every last one of us off the face of the planet. To demonstrate that, Embark released this video of a prototype robot learning how to walk and keep its balance when being hit with various objects. Now, the challenge that any PvE shooter game that uses AI enemies faces is that there's a risk the enemy AI might actually act so unnaturally that it kind of spoils the game or makes it a bit lackluster. A couple of examples here. This is one of the zombie-like AI puppets in the early access survival shooter Scum. They have very set attack movements, meaning you can strike them, then back away, strike again, rinse and repeat until they're dead. It's a routine that can become a bit of a chore after a while. Now at the other end of the scale, here I'm playing the early access open world PvE and PvP shooter Deadside, and at this helicopter crash site I place bushes between myself and the enemy AI that guard the helicopter, but magically they're able to shoot me straight through the foliage with laser-like accuracy, even though they're completely unable to see me. Now, you might have shared similar experiences in combating AI in other games yourself. It's these kind of actions from AI that step outside the nuanced behaviours that we would expect from actual players that can make people like myself, who generally prefer PvP shooters, less interested in PvE shooters. However, that also means that any development studio that can overcome these common issues with AI enemies in PvE shooters has plenty of opportunity to draw players in who are looking for a sophisticated AI to fight against. After all, people do want to play PvE shooters, and right now there are a lot of PvP shooters out there, some of which are kind of mediocre, so an excellent PvE shooter should be a welcome change for many. With Embark Studios placing AI enemies at the very core of Ark Raiders gameplay, this is possibly the most important element for them to get right for the success of the game. The AI need to be a sophisticated, well-balanced enemy right out of the gate, because in many ways they are essentially what the game rides on, given that it's named after them, and that in turn leads us to the next key element, and perhaps what is my greatest concern about Ark Raiders at this stage. So we know which enemy is now destined to become our old adversary in Ark Raiders, but we don't know the exact sequence that we'll progress through as we enter and complete combat with them before going out for another round of fighting. This, of course, is known as the gameplay loop. As an example from another third-person co-op shooter, in Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands by Ubisoft, the gameplay loop essentially sends you on missions that generally involve going into combat with AI enemies at an enemy base or a local village, or maybe you'll ambush a convoy. If you're successful and eliminate the enemies at the location, you get a reward in return or a new piece of intel, which then leads you into similar gameplay loops. Now, even though Ghost Recon Wildlands has a large map, some 570 square kilometers, with multiple locations, the gameplay loop in that game eventually becomes a bit repetitive because it kind of follows the same formula. Attack AI enemies at a base or a village or in a convoy over and over. And so this is one of the things I'm concerned about for Ark Raiders. Actually, concerned probably isn't the right word because it hasn't happened yet. Nevertheless, I'm hoping that Ark Raiders won't just be a series of repetitive battles against Ark with little variety other than the types of AI that you're fighting. I would like to see Embark add some unexpected variations to the game. Missions that require something unusual, like traveling to a ruined bunker across the map to look for a hidden piece of equipment, and maybe Ark know the equipment is there and are looking for it as well, so they can destroy it and stop you from gaining access to it. So not only do we need to find it before them, but you also need to fight them off so that you can get to it first. Now, I'm just spitballing here, to be fair, but my point is that when there is a very defined enemy in a game and somewhat limited variations of those enemies, at least that we've seen so far, it's very important that the developer provides us with some sort of surprise. I hope Embark find a way within Ark Raiders to build tension in us as we play the game. And that probably means varying the pace of the gameplay so it's not just a full speed shooter, but includes slower paced tactical planning. Like a scene in some Tarantino film, I'd like to see Embark create situations for us where we think we've outsmarted Ark with our experience and tactics, but then the enemy starts to behave in a way that we didn't expect. Perhaps they temporarily retreat when we were ready for them to attack. We then lose track of where they've gone. Then we have a slow creeping uncertainty starting to eke in as we start to realize that we're dealing with an enemy that is outflanking us rather than just fighting us head on. I want the gameplay loop to force us to think outside the box and keep us on the edge of our seats. So, please surprise us with some tactical elements, Embark.
If I need surprise.
Now, while the enemy AI in Ark Raiders are definitely going to be the core of this third-person shooter game, the environment will potentially provide a decent portion of the game's depth, and will help to tell us the past and present story of the Ark Raiders. One of the very first videos the team at Embark Studios released after they became a studio was this footage of a 256 square kilometre environment that 3 senior environmental artists completed within only 3 weeks. Everything we've seen from Embark right from the start speaks to the in-game environment being absolutely stunning, which I'm really excited about. However,
did you ever think that maybe there's more to life than being really, really, really ridiculously good looking?
even the most spectacular landscape can become boring if all you do is travel across it. I, for one, don't want a walking simulator with pretty views. What I would like to see is a natural but varied landscape that provides the opportunity to explore and discover, and also has a few secrets to uncover as well. And that, in my mind, includes Easter eggs as well as natural elements that can affect gameplay. We know that as part of the gameplay, players will scavenge the ruins of the past to find equipment that they can use against Ark. Hopefully those ruins are varied, elaborate, and help to tell us the story of what happened when Ark first arrived on Earth. Supplementing a great environment will be the weather. This original environmental video we saw included dynamic weather, so we should expect that to continue into the game, with volumetric clouds and changes of weather, potentially including snowfall on the ground, which I'm guessing might make a difference in how easily we can see enemies on the ground, amongst other unforeseen impacts on gameplay. Now, will we see any dynamic environmental elements beyond weather, such as volcanic eruptions? It's really an unknown at this stage, although we do know that Embark Studio's environmental artists completed photogrammetry trips to Tenerife and Iceland, both of which are volcanic landscapes, with Iceland especially having active volcanism. So it's a possibility that we might see volcanism incorporated into the game, but I'd be surprised if it was something as elaborate as violent eruptions or lava flows. Maybe we'll get a few steaming volcanic vents scattered across the landscape. As far as how the environment contributes to telling us the past and present story of the Ark Raiders, one of the most important parts of that will be the abandoned buildings. The snippets of concept art and video we've seen of those buildings so far tells us there's going to be a lot of detail scattered around those areas, and I'd be surprised if the experienced game makers in Embark don't take every opportunity they can to thread as much detail as they can through the ruins across the game's landscape. I expect some of those details will be obvious and some might be a little more hidden, requiring us to explore the landscape and search out some of the details the environment has to offer. Personally, it was the environmental teasers for this game that drew me into it in the first place, so I have very high hopes that the Ark Raiders environment will be up there with the best game environments we've seen. One of the best things about Ark Raiders is that it's going to be free to play. One of the worst things about Ark Raiders is that it's going to be free to play. Honestly, I don't know, in fact, no one knows if either of those statements is going to prove to be even remotely close to accurate. But what I do know is that we as players and Embark Studios have to face the double-edged sword that is a free-to-play game. The positives of free-to-play games are that anyone can play Ark Raiders and it doesn't cost you a cent. It generally also means that player numbers are pretty good and therefore there's usually a strong community around the game. So not only will you have a game to play, but you'll also have other people to chat with about the game. Now, if you're wondering why Embark Studios decided to make the game free to play versus just having it as a game we pay up front for, the likely reason is that they were fully funded from the start. In other words, Embark Studios doesn't have a publisher that bankrolled them that they need to provide an immediate return to. This means that they can focus on a much longer term view for Ark Raiders, providing seasonal updates to the game year after year, potentially for many years to come. Free-to-play games that do this well can be very lucrative for the developer and long-lasting for the player. The money that they make on a free-to-play game has to come from somewhere though, and comments I've seen in the growing Ark Raiders community show that people are genuinely concerned that because the game is going to be free to play, that the in-game monetization that will inevitably come from that decision by the game makers could be significantly detrimental to the game. To be more specific, people seem to be worried about what influence Nexon, Embark Studios' majority shareholder, will have on the game when it comes to monetization. And here's where I think players might be viewing this from the wrong angle. Nexon, to maybe oversimplify things, generally make free-to-play mobile games or games that have a mobile game style of arcadiness to them, and then they have in-game monetization for those games. Some of their games have been hugely lucrative as a result of having monetization that you might say is pretty typical for a mobile game, maybe a little more in your face than monetization we could expect from a free-to-play PC game. However, it's important to note that Nexon is not the publisher for Ark Raiders. Embark Studios are publishing the game themselves, as you can see here on the Steam page for Ark Raiders. So, even though Embark is majority owned by Nexon, it will be Embark that makes the call on how they monetize the game. So rather than thinking of Nexon pushing their methods onto Embark, perhaps we should view their purchase of Embark as Nexon actually expanding their range of game styles and monetization into areas that they haven't been previously. That still doesn't mean that Embark can't cock up the monetization of the game. To be sure, I'd like to know that anything I purchase in-game doesn't affect moment-to-moment gameplay in any way. What we pay for in the game should simply make the game more pleasant to play, rather than allow you to advance faster than someone else. Now, the main areas I'd like to see monetization are character cosmetics, weapon cosmetics, vehicle cosmetics, and character slots, so you can choose to develop several characters. Personally, I'd also be okay with paying for extra storage of equipment at our base in the game, in the same way that Escape from Tarkov offers you the option to pay more up front for extra storage slots in your hideout. Now, while storage can have some effect on your ability to play the game, it's not directly impacting the game as you're playing it. Let me know in the comments below what you'd like to see as far as customization goes. And that leads me to my last key element for Arc Raiders' success. If Embark Studios intend for Arc Raiders to be a game that we play for years to come, then I'd like to know that I can develop my characters to a depth that warrants playing them for years to come. I see this as happening in two ways. Firstly, I'd like to be able to customize my character's fashion from head to toe, and the way their weapons and vehicles look, as I mentioned when discussing monetization. But additionally, I'd like to see a skill tree for my character that is extensive and allows me to feel like after putting hundreds if not thousands of hours into the game, I am still striving to grind new skills and access to new things that newer players simply don't have access to. And this is where the advantage of being a player versus environment game might really be noticed. If we have a character that we've played for 500 hours and they get access to the ability to create a new piece of equipment, like a jetpack for instance, that doesn't really take away from other players' enjoyment of the game because I'm not competing against those players. All it will do is help my squad mates and make me feel like I've earned my place in my squad. That not only encourages me, but also my squad mates to skill up as well. How in-depth any skill tree is within the game is a complete unknown, but my hope is that when we see it, we're immediately thinking, oh, this is going to take me a couple of years to work through at least. Now, there are a lot of experienced game makers at Embark Studios, and from those that were involved with the likes of Battlefield 1 and 5, we know that we should expect Arc Raiders to be a game with depth in characters, the environment, and progression within the game. How far Embark can take those things is yet to be seen. If you found this video helpful, please consider leaving a like, and if you'd like to get the latest updates about Arc Raiders, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on my next video. Thanks for watching, enjoy the rest of your day, kia kaha, stay strong.
Everybody sees, stop and bright, last one to leave, turn out the light, last one to leave.